invite. To do that, I'll just go ahead and introduce our panelists here. First one up, we have Angela Ding. Angela is a first-year MS student in SLP and Vanderbilt University. She was born and raised in Northern California and studied in French and linguistics at NYU. She discovered the field of SLP during the pandemic lockdowns and found it to be a perfect mix of her interests in language education and advocacy for children and elderly. Our second panelist is Phyllis Tan, born in sunny Singapore. Phyllis is an international student and a second-year graduate student in a master's program in speech-language pathology. In Boston University, Phyllis has a wide array of interests, including multilingualism, voice disorders, dysphagia, and cognitive communication disorders. She's open to working with and learning from all populations. In her free time, Phyllis loves to cook as a frisbee and play mahjong with friends. Welcome. And we have another student panelist, and that would be Emily Lee. She's a fourth-year doctoral student of audiology at the University of Colorado Boulder. And she will be completing her degree in May 2023. So congratulations, Emily. This is the final stretch. You're very close. You're very close. And we are thrilled to have you here on the panel because you are our only representative in AUD. Last but not least, we have Su Yan. Su Yan is a bilingual Hmong English SLP. She graduated from St. Cloud State University in Pennsylvania. Go Huskies! I have to self-disclose. I also graduated from St. Cloud State University a few years back. So very nice to see you here, Su Yan, and welcome. I'm so thrilled that you agreed to do this with us. Currently, Su Yan is an elementary school-based SLP in Minneapolis, as well as a per diem acute care SLP with a healthcare system in the Twin Cities metropolitan area. So you're in for a treat. We have a very diverse panel here to discuss all the questions you have for grad school admission. So let's get going, shall we? So I don't know, Ray, would you be able to maybe share screen so that we can see what's on the Padlet? And then panelists, please go ahead and take a stab on whatever questions you would like to address, and we'll move those questions along the way on the side, okay? And yes, Shin-Chu, you're also from Minnesota. We have a really good representation from the Midwest, I think. So good to have you here. So I'm still seeing a black screen here. Ray, are you working on sharing your screen? Or maybe Shin, are you able to do that?
Sorry. All of these buttons are like confusing me a little, but I think I got it.
Awesome.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, this is perfect. Awesome. Thank you. So there's one question right under. So we have some themes here. So participants, students, if you like, you have questions about missions, questions about diversity, inclusion, questions about workplace, feel free to add more parts, okay, of questions onto the Padlet board here. Okay, so panelists, does anyone would like to take a stab on the only question we have under admissions right now?
I can, so I'm a post-bac student. I didn't have an undergrad in the field. So, my advice would be tailored towards those who are coming from a different undergrad degree. And for me, what really helped me was that I actually volunteered at a local speech clinic here and really used that experience to leverage my application. And I had my supervisor at that position write me a really great recommendation of letter because it's already difficult enough as it is to be an out-of-field applicant. And so trying to get that experience is very crucial when applying to graduate school, just because, we know the programs are very competitive. So having that background knowledge to show that you have had some experience in it is very important. But also it really prepped me to the field, and a lot of what I learned during that experience is what I apply now as a clinician as well. So it's very helpful in the beginning, but also long term as well.
Awesome. That's a really good suggestion.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think when you talk with professors about what they look for in terms of applicants, I think they like to see a student that's really well-rounded. So not someone who focused only on their GPA or a student that only focused on their volunteer work, but finding avenues that you feel like makes you competitive. So look at your program and take advantage of everything that's available to you. So go to your professor's office hours and say, I want to learn about what research you're doing, or even better yet, look up online what they've published and then go to them and say, I looked up a few of your papers. I saw some of the work you've done recently. I'd love to learn more. What opportunities are available in your lab? There's opportunities to do senior honors thesis at a lot of programs. And I think, especially if you're applying to research heavy programs, they love to see that initiative, seeing what leadership opportunities, whether that's in your program or outside with NISLA or AAA, getting involved with whatever leadership position there is, I think shows that you're someone who likes to step up and take on more than just the bare minimum of doing classes. So volunteer work, and definitely even if you have the ability to work as an audiology technician or maybe observe a lot, anything that adds not only to our field, but even things outside of the field, I think shows that you're someone who goes above and beyond, and it makes your application stand out a little bit more.
Absolutely. That's really great advice, Emily. Thank you.
Yeah, that was all really great advice that Emily and Sue gave. I wanted to give something that might be more relevant to the application side of things. I think when you're thinking of which school you want to apply to, you're thinking of whether you're a good fit for the school, and you want to look at what each program has to offer, because when you really want to go to a school, the application, the letter that you're going to write is going to be really different from a school that you just applied to just because you want the name of the school. If you really want this program because it offers these number of externships, if you really want this program because it offers this special opportunity, and if you're able to highlight that in your application, I think that's something that will make you stand out from other people, because it shows that you want to be in this school and not just, I'm applying to so many different schools. It'll show that you're very interested, and programs want students that are invested in the program so that they can invest back in you.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think of following what Dilys said about specificity of, what makes you specifically want this program. Also, what specifically makes you qualified or special. So don't be afraid to share about your unique perspective as an Asian or as an Asian American, and the stigma often surrounding having a convo about our unique challenges. And perhaps, or at least in my family, there was a great stigma around discussing disability, and there was a whole culture of perfectionism. And I talked about that in my application and how that made me so inspired to work with children, especially children of similar backgrounds to mine who have that type of pressure. So being specific kind of in your experiences, and also listing specific, don't use actual names, but specific professors, specific teachers, specific students you had that inspired you to go to this field. Specificity. That's a big one for me.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, Angela. Shin just made a great comment in the chat as well, in case you missed it. I think, I agree with Angela and Shin. API, right? That's our unique identity. Don't be shy to bringing up, even if it's not the focus of your personal essay, right? That could be just dropping it in, because ASHA is big with pushing diversity in our population, right? We know that we are the fourth widest profession SLP, and I just learned that the third is actually AUD. So ASHA is, trying really hard to recruit and retain more, racial minorities into this profession. But I think it's really good to also, drop it somewhere in your personal essay, right? We want to build a more diverse workforce in SLP and AUD, and that could be your mission, right? To make that happen. So I think that's definitely a good, unique angle to kind of sell yourself a little bit. So think about that. Really good. Yeah, and it looks like we have a new question there. I'll just go ahead and read it there. Really appreciate any tips or insight from those who have gone through the interview process. Oh, that's really good. And even some questions that schools asked of you in the interview as well. Any tips or resources are really appreciated. So panelists.
Yes, St. Cloud State definitely does do interviews. But again, my interview questions are probably different from students who came in with the field. So a lot of my interview questions were just situational based, where they really want to get a feel of who I am and what skill sets I had. So I do remember a lot of it being like, name a time when you really had to think outside the box, be creative. So very situational based, where they really want to see how does this person utilize their critical thinking skills, creativity skills, because we know in our field we have to be very flexible and innovative all at once. And so for an out of field applicant, that's what they really focused on in my interviews. Other than that, that was my only experience with interviews during my application process. A lot of the schools I applied to didn't have one.
Sue, if you don't mind me asking some follow-up questions, while you were in the interview, was it a one-on-one you with a professor, or maybe you along with a group of interviewees? I don't know, just tell us a little more about the context.
Yeah, so it was interview day, and so St. Cloud broke us into small groups. So the group I was in were out-of-field applicants, so post-bac students. There's about 5 or 6 of us, and then we were just in a room with 2 or 3 professors. And so it was a group interview, but they did allow each of us a chance and an opportunity to answer the question. So you don't feel like you're trying to beat the other to answer and not get an opportunity. They were very fair in listening to each one of us.
Did you have to interact with other interviewees, or it was just more directed to the professors?
It was more directed towards the professors.
Alrighty, good to know.
I just put in a bunch of stuff in the chat, but I know it's more specific to audiology, but I think it could also translate to speech. The American Academy of Audiology provides fantastic resources for students, not only applying to grad school, but once in grad school and applying for externships. Not only do they include some of the things like sample questions you can be asked or questions you can ask your interviewers, but it also kind of walks you through things to include in the letter of intent, advice about letters of rec. So I think it's nice to see it, even if you're not audiology focused. It's a great walkthrough. But it's so important, I think, to place the emphasis on, am I a good fit for this program? So although you can role play, for me, having a friend sit with me or even talking out loud in the mirror, some questions that you may expect, even if you aren't asked those questions, I think having a flow of some things you're prepared to say can help a lot with the interview process. But remember, you want to, in some way, not shop around, but you want to make sure that you're going to see yourself at that program too. So spend an equal amount of time investing in the questions are important for you. What makes a difference between one program from the other in terms of your values and what you see yourself doing at the end of that program too.
I had I didn't have a group interview. I had an individual interview. So I think this might be slightly different. For me, some of the questions that they asked that I didn't necessarily expect, so I thought would be good to share, are they asked me about how COVID changed the entire field and how you think that might impact your how you're going to practice in the future, which I thought was a great question. And I think it's worth considering even if they don't ask you that in your interview. And they also asked me about diversity, equity, and inclusion in my interview. So something where you can talk about your own experiences if you do. And I feel like Emily said, like it's very important to practice with someone, especially like the questions you know that they will ask, but make sure that you're not robotic because they want to get to know you. And that's the whole reason why they have an interview, right? That's why schools don't have an interview, because the schools that do have an interview want to talk to you, get to know you. So make sure that your personality still shows through, even if you have prepared some answers.
I love that point, Dillis. I feel like that's huge. My husband, because of COVID, when I did my externship interviews, he was around listening to me do some of them, and he was like, I feel like it's hard not to get in this rut of saying what you think they want you to say, even though it's tempting. I think people can sense that too. So don't be scared to be yourself and like show who you are, because that's what they want. They don't want a bunch of students who are coming forth saying things that they feel like are the right things. They really want to get to know who you are. That's such a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would just add that also bring questions, right? Because there will likely a time when they ask you, if you have any questions, don't just smile and say, no, everything's good, so come with specific questions, show kind of a chance, right? Again, to showcase yourself. So do some research and ask, good questions. I think that's going to another opportunity for you to impress your professors.
Dress professionally.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, dress professionally. If you're having an interview, don't look like you just got good.
Right, absolutely. Alrighty, if we don't have any additional comments, let's move on to our next card there under workplace. So what is your day-to-day life like working in your specific field? So maybe Sue, since you are our clinician representative here on the panel.
Yeah, I can safely say like I really love what I do, and especially now getting so I work full-time at a school, and then I do work at a hospital in acute care, and I feel like I'm getting the perfect balance of working with kids and working with adults, which was something I've always wanted but never really knew how to find that middle ground. So this is a good like a good transition for me right now. So at the schools, I work with a caseload of approximately 30 kids. And that's actually pretty low for me this year. But I work with kids, predominantly students with articulation and language. And then our school specifically has a developmental cognitive delay program. So I'll work with kids in those classrooms, and I collaborate with a music therapist. And we do a lot of core word introductions. And then I also collaborate with a special ed teacher. And so a lot of it is just co-treating, which I really love. It's really helpful to really apply skills that's not just in the speech room, but transfers to the classroom, which is the most important. And so this year I have been pretty swamped with evaluations as well. And of course, due to the pandemic, you're seeing a lot of catch up with evaluations this past 2 years. And so in the middle of like 10 evaluations right now for students with articulation language, students who are moving in and moving, and so it's pretty busy. I have a lot on my plate, but I feel like I've been able to, it's my third year, so I've found a really great balance that has worked out for me. But yeah, I see maybe like 10 groups of kids a day. And then I make sure I set aside time to do due process work and documentation, because if you don't, that really starts to pile up and you're going to forget what you were working on with kids. So it's very important to just stay on top of that when you are working, to log everything and get it done that same day, just so you don't fall behind. And then at the hospital, I work in acute care. So a lot of what I do is like 95% dysphagia. So just diet recommendations and evaluations for stroke, cognitive language, and dysphagia. I haven't done video swallows yet, just because I started fairly new, but it's a really different pace and just very different at the hospitals, but I really enjoy it. I just really like the in and out, treatments. And then I also like working with adults as well. So I'm very happy with where I'm at right now professionally. but don't really know what it'll look like in 5 years. So yeah.
How about you, Emily? You are doing your externship right now. Am I correct? Would you mind sharing a little bit about your day-to-day life?
Absolutely. So previously, I was placed at Children's Hospital, Kaiser, and the University Hospital in Colorado, or UC Health. Fun fact, if you guys know or watch like The Bachelorette, it's where like that bachelorette worked at the same hospital. And now I'm doing my 4th-year externship at the VA Medical Hospital in Los Angeles. And my day-to-day it looks very different. So I think while in undergrad, a lot of classes focus on the anatomy side and oral rehab and hearing aids, that is a factor in audiology. So some of my days I am doing hearing tests or audiologic evaluations and diagnosing a variety type of hearing loss, working with ENT doctors to figure out what's going on. And then we'll move forward with a treatment, which often could either be like bone conduction hearing aids, traditional hearing aids, or cochlear implants. And then we'll do the fitting of those devices and the checks. So making sure that our veterans are up to par with the cleaning and if they need to review anything or if they need additional counseling of acclimating to their devices. So that's the hearing aid factor of my week. I also run the tinnitus management classes. So the VA is a huge leader, I guess, in the development and research of our understanding of tinnitus. And we offer our veterans 3 classes a month. The first class is purely educational about what tinnitus is, what are risk factors that could exacerbate their tinnitus. And then we do a second class, that's a group class, talking about management strategies for tinnitus. And that third class, we work with our speech pathologists and our psychologists, talking about attention and cognitive behavioral therapies that they can consider. Then on one of the days, I do vestibular testing, which is like dizziness and finding out what's going on with the vestibular system if someone has vertigo, and then treating that vertigo. And then on Fridays, I do central auditory processing evaluations or CAPD, and then referring out once we have findings or finding treatment if hearing aids are a good option for that population or that individual veteran. I will say, I think one thing I've really appreciated about this placement that I haven't had before is we know that insurance companies don't recognize hearing aids as something necessary for healthcare. It's considered cosmetic at the moment. And the beautiful thing about audiology is we're an up and coming field. We're fairly new. So much research is still coming out relating to the effects of cognition and function of the brain when hearing loss comes into play. So I think as more research is produced, it's going to be nice that we'll see insurance companies cover things. But right now, they don't. So anywhere outside of the VA, people are looking at spending upwards of $3,000 up to $7,000 for a pair of hearing aids, while at the VA, we offer the same hearing aid manufacturers. We only offer the highest level of technology, nothing less, for free. And we take care of the repairs for the lifetime of the hearing aids. So it's nice to have that financial side kind of taken away from my day-to-day. But I know also there's a lot of beautiful parts when it comes to private practice or having freedom to work in different settings. So that's been something I've appreciated about my placement currently.
Awesome. And then does anyone would like to speak to the pandemic affecting the workplace?
Yeah, so as I kind of mentioned before, so the pandemic has, really affected students, as I'm sure we all are aware of. You're seeing that, like second graders now have been in school for nearly 2 years online. So this is like their first full year being in person, at least in my school district. And so academically, the pandemic has put a big toll on them. And then that goes hand in hand with what we work on them with. I have like 4th graders who are reading at kindergarten level and whatnot. And so in that aspect of academics, it's really impacted our students and they really need our support. And I think that's why my school district and my principal has really advocated for push-in services for us. And so instead of pulling kids out, especially our language kids, push in and work on what they're working on in the classroom. But, for articulation, obviously that one's more pull-out basis is most effective. And then with evaluations as well. So you're having a lot of students who have speech or language challenges, but then they haven't been evaluated because they haven't been seen for 2 years to realize that there is, a delay. And so that's where we're playing catch up with evaluation right now in the school system. I'm sure a lot of other SLPs in the school system can agree with me. It's a lot of evaluation catch up. And then as well as really trying to advocate and support our students who didn't get these services during the pandemic, even though they were offered. Of course, it was hard for a lot of our families to log on. So we're very open-minded to the idea that not everyone had the same access during the pandemic to their education. And right now we're just trying our best to serve our students.
Awesome.
I can answer this question from the perspective of a current grad student. So 3 things come to mind right now in terms of my clinical placements. The first is that, at least for Vanderbilt Hospital, there's fewer on-site interpreters. So one of my big clinical interests is culturally and linguistically responsive practices, but there's fewer on-site interpreters. So we often have to video call interpreters in. And so there's kind of a lack of intimacy, unfortunately, between the interpreter and the clinician and the family, which is not very preferred. We have like one on-site Spanish-speaking interpreter, but no one else. And the second is that there's a bigger mix of a virtual and a clinical experience. So currently, my clinician that I'm shadowing, she's got 2 or 3 patients that just do teletherapy because they live very far away and it's just a better option. So yeah, rise in teletherapy. And the third is that there's been more unexpected cancellations due to COVID concerns or suspected COVID, especially for the children that we see. Yeah.
Please. So the next question reads, what are some tips for making connections and using your professional network? Helen, if you don't mind me calling on you, I know that you are fresh on the job, right? You are a CF. And by the way, Helen is on the API executive board. She also helped organizing this event. So if you don't mind sharing anything that since you are just launching your career, right? Anything that you could share with our audience?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm so sorry. I was a little bit late because I had a last minute client. Yes, so I am 1 year out of grad school. So I'm a clinical fellow here at a private practice in the LA area. I guess my tips for making connections, I would say always keep your connections close by. You never know when somebody's going to move to some area. You never know when somebody's going to know somebody in another area. I went to grad school in Chicago, but I'm originally from Los Angeles. And so a lot of my connections, I guess, on the surface level, I could say that they're across the country. Why would I need to keep in contact with somebody from Chicago if I'm living in Los Angeles? But you'd be surprised. The SLP world is very small and a lot of people know a lot of people. And so even here, I just kind of had like random connections from alumni, from friends of alumni, from colleagues, from co-colleagues that have been in like my circle here in Los Angeles. And those are connections that I made because of people in Chicago. So always keep your connections close by, always be nice to everybody, always be helpful for everybody. It's kind of like I scratch your back, you scratch mine. And so just always make sure that you are being gracious and with your help. And then also, keeping your classmates close by as well, because you never know.
Great advice.
For me, during my externships in grad school, I unfortunately only had one because the pandemic shut down my medical one. So I just stuck it out with my educational one. And I got really close with my supervisor. And she actually was the one that referred me to our speech department supervisor in the district to be like, oh, hey, Sue's very interested in working the school district. What can she do? And so, I know, of course, there are a lot of supervisors aren't the greatest, let's be honest here. But, thankfully for me, I had a really great supervisor who was very supportive, who really allowed me to take control of sessions and learn from me as well. But then at the end of the day, she knew that, if I wanted to work in the school district, she was willing to help me. So if you could build that bond with your supervisor, that's awesome. And right now we're colleagues and we're still in touch. And so really try to utilize those externships to network. You don't need to do it when you start working. It happens in grad school as well.
Okay, if no additional comments, let's move to the right. We have one question on grad school. So how or in what way is grad school different comparing to undergrad? And how did grad school differ from or similar to what you expected? So panelists, you can take the question away.
I can start. Let me be the first to say I underestimated grad school. I didn't realize how busy it would be. I didn't realize how late my classes, my externships would go. But I think so that's the bad side. I didn't expect the workload to be that heavy, and it really does take a toll on you. And especially if you need to work alongside grad school, it's gonna be a lot of time and effort. But I do think what was pleasantly surprising was the connection, like how much easier it is to make connections with faculty. I think a lot of the faculty are very open to you going to meet them, talking to them, like Emily talked about their research, just about life in general. And I think another good thing, at least in my program, is that I don't get a sense that everyone's very competitive and cutthroat. People are working together, working to help each other, giving each other resources, study guides, and not just, oh, I'm trying to be the best person here. Because you got into grad school, you put in all that hard work. You're not going to be fighting. You might be fighting for a few of the same jobs, but honestly, having that support network is way more important than trying to fight it out. So I think building those connections, like connecting back to the previous question and really just being supportive of one another is a very pleasant surprise, I would say. And just one more thing about the previous thing that one of my professors said. They mentioned going to conferences and like connecting with people there, and not just going to conferences for the sake of going to them, actually having questions about the topic at hand and making conversation with the people who are speaking at those conferences could be one more way to strengthen your professional network.
Yes, absolutely. And who knows, you may run into textbook authors and some big names in your area, right? I remember running into Carol Weatherby, so she's a big name in autism. And also Maple Rice a few years back at ASHA, and you just feel like starstruck a little bit. So it's definitely a very interesting experience for me. So yeah, absolutely. If you can go, you will definitely kind of open your eyes a little bit, right? Because otherwise you're just studying with your cohort, and I don't know, maybe that's 25 more students, right? And you feel like, oh, the world's SOP is just so small. Yes, it's small in a way, but it's also very big, right? ASHA pre-pandemic used to be 15,000, 22,000 every year. I went to, Washington, D.C. last year. So that's the first year after the pandemic. It was in hybrid form. And about 5,000, I don't know how many are going this year to New Orleans, but I'm guessing it's definitely more than 5,000, probably not quite to, 20,000 yet, but definitely you're going to see lots of people and you'll just feel kind of a little more passionate about our profession. So yeah, absolutely. I agreed everything that Delise shared. So moving on to a similar question right down there, what do you wish you have learned more or pay attention to in undergraduate that would help you in grad school or your future career?
I don't know if it's necessarily what I wish I could have learned more in undergrad. I think when you go into grad school, they really do consider that, you're coming from all over. A lot of the students they accepted aren't from their own undergrad program. So I don't feel like there was this high expectation that you need to know everything as we would have taught it down to the fine detail. No, they kind of start fresh and say like we're going to do everything we can. And the nice thing about grad school, it's hard because the cohort for speech is a little bit larger than audiology. Audiology tends to stick around about 10 people to a cohort. So I feel like there's a lot of motivation that I found, more motivation than an undergrad of your professors, like Dills mentioned, to kind of pour back into you. They want you to be successful. They want to sit down with you and talk about what you're not understanding in the class. And there's that bit of fear for most programs that kind of show and talk about how if you don't have this certain grade, there's going to be repercussions of that. Like you need to be able to meet a certain grade to keep going in the program, or else you have to repeat the test, repeat the class, or you won't be able to move on. And I think that sounds scary initially, but the thing is, professors, at least at my program, really comforted us in saying, yes, that's real. Like we can't let you pass the program or become a doctor or a clinician and not show that you're competent in these areas. But it's not like we're going to let you just fall through the cracks. There will be multiple conversations and meetings and us reaching out to you and trying to ask you how we can support you before it gets to that point. So I feel like don't worry about having to have all the answers and go through your notes before you go to grad school. No, you're going to cover that in grad school. That's what it's for. I think more so what shocked me about grad school that was different than undergrad was the mentality shift. Especially in my first year, I experienced like a lot of imposter syndrome. Like, I shouldn't be here. I don't deserve to be here. Who let me in? Why did they accept me? What were they thinking? And a lot of that, I think, just comes from suddenly being aware of how little you know. And you sitting next to 9 other students in a small cohort who have way more experience or are coming in with different levels of knowledge, and just comfort yourself in knowing whatever knowledge people come and bring from undergrad, it's going to level out as you go through the program. There's not going to be one person who knows everything, and then you're always going to feel behind. Maybe in the beginning, that's fine. That's expected. In fact, I would encourage you to anticipate that, but have like the grace to yourself to say, I don't have to know everything. That's not what my professors expect of me. I'm on my own journey, and navigate it that way. I think it took me up until like even going through externship process, like that imposter syndrome came in. And I think coming from maybe a diverse cultural background, there's a lot of things that come with that also. So have grace with yourself, find the people in your cohort that you can depend on, that make you feel good and encourage you and support you, that you can study with, and just do the best you can. It's not a group cohort journey. It's a you journey. It's an individual journey.
Yeah, I really agree with what you both have said. Imposter syndrome is real. And I think it's great that we have graduate panels like this that are catered towards, students of color, in particular API members here. Because I think for me, grad school, the workload was a lot different than what I had anticipated, of course. But then what really helps is that you're obviously in grad school because you have this passion for the field. And that passion is going to be what's going to drive you through all those exams, those clinical experience, those projects. That's really what motivated me to finally have a focus on what I'm learning about. Whereas in college, you have to take all these generals to fulfill the requirements. But it's like, great, I have these next 2 years to really hone in on these skills that I'm very passionate about. And in that sense, it makes it easy. It's you're just consistently motivated. That's not to say, I didn't cry my first week of graduate school or anything, and you will cry maybe one too many times. But what really reassured myself was knowing how competitive it is to get to these programs. And so I would have to tell myself, like, Sue, there's a reason why you're here. You're here because they see potential in you and you were meant for this. So that's kind of how I, talk to myself whenever I felt imposter syndrome. And because, our field, there's a lot of type A personalities, extroverts, and I'm more the introvert side. And so it's like I see my classmates like very out there, they're vocally passionate, but I'm not quite like that. It's like I hold my passion inside, but then it's hard to compare, like, oh, like, am I not as, passionate about this field because I'm not exerting that every day in class. And then I have to really tell myself, like, no, like, like I'm just not an extrovert. I'm not type A. Like, don't let that get to you. And that's where you'll eventually learn, like, all the personalities in your cohort, you all will like create a bond and a cohesive bond. Like, yes, like what Della said, like we were building study guides together because we all wanted each other to succeed. And I would only wish that that's the type of grad school program and cohort that you all get into, because you rely on each other so much more than you would think. In college, it's kind of like, okay, like I have my group of friends, but they might be in a different major or whatever. Like, but in grad school, these people know exactly what you're going through. So definitely rely on each other.
Awesome. That's really good advice. There's another one down the other column, right? So how about your bilingual abilities, cultural competence help you, especially in the medical setting? So maybe Su Yan, would you like to elaborate on that?
Yeah. So right now, it's kind of great because the school I work at, it's predominantly Hmong students as well, so I get to use that. It's my first time using my language. So in the medical setting, I don't use an interpreter, obviously, and I think just having my face, like someone who looks like them, even if it's not a Hmong person, like just walking in, you can kind of sense the relief that they feel, like, oh, like this person's gonna understand me. And so using my language has been really great. I feel like I'm able to build this rapport with my Hmong patients, because I'm sure we all know, like when our parents or when the older generations go to the hospital, they don't always disclose what's going on with them, because they know that it's hard. And with interpreters, sometimes things get lost in translation. So me coming in and just really educating my patients about what I'm here to do and what's going on, it just relieves that stress that I can see that they have. But even to my colleagues, and so I work strictly in inpatient, but some of my colleagues who work in outpatient have asked me, like, oh, can you sit in on this patient, because we hear concerns of fluency, but we don't know Hmong, so maybe you can help us and just let us know, does she have fluency problems from post-stroke? And so it's been really great to work in that aspect too with my colleagues and be a helpful resource. But then you also get sad because it's like, well, there's like so little of us and we need more of us in this field. And so it's been really eye-opening in the medical field to be able to use my language in that sense, not just to patients, but for my colleagues as well, seeing how, as little as it is, to just simply sit and observe to see if this woman is stuttering, right? Because if they didn't have, like they had the interpreter there, but it's easy for her to say, oh, like the main issue is the interpreter couldn't really describe what was being said. And so our ears versus the interpreter's ears is very different. Like SLPs were able to pick it up what is actually going on, whereas interpreters, sometimes they try to, what I've noticed with some interpreters is that they try to speak for the patient. And so they might over-exaggerate symptoms or, under-exaggerate symptoms. And so it's good to just have an open ear there to listen and hear it out. And then even in my school setting, working with a lot of Hmong students and Hmong parents, it's been very helpful because a lot of these parents don't even understand what speech is. A lot of them don't even know their child is on an IEP or receiving speech services. It's just another teacher. But this year really working with Hmong parents and finally hearing them be like, oh, like we didn't realize she was in speech. It's really helpful to be that middle ground person to really educate them on the IEP process as well, because a lot of them just think, oh, it's another teacher that my student goes and see, when we are very specific on tackling these certain goals that they have. So it's definitely very beneficial and definitely a selling point. I don't want to say like use it to boost your applications, but if you know a second language, mention that and explain exactly how you can utilize that in the field, because the speech field, it's not just English, right? We're not only focusing on English communication disorders. It's all the languages, and we know our languages best. So really advocate and advertise yourself if you are bilingual, because it's very important in this field.
Awesome. So to let our panelists take a quick break, I'll speak to the bottom question under workplace. So the question reads, what is the job duty as a faculty in CSC department? What is the proportion of time you need to devote to research, teaching, and clinical works? So this is a very broad question. I'll try my best to kind of talk to the main points here. So for me, I teach at Westchester University. This is a teaching-focused school, so we are ranked R2, meaning that we don't focus solely on research. We pay more attention to teaching. And that's why I have 4 courses in the spring and also 4 in the fall semester. So that's kind of the majority of my time. Research is more like a side gig for me or for any R2 professors, right? So I say probably I would devote 60-70% of my time to teaching and then 30 to research. And of course, there are some other responsibilities such as advising students, right, every semester. And there are some services that you need to do for the department and the college. If I were at an R1 university, so here in Pennsylvania, that's Temple University, UPenn, kind of big name universities, that would be a completely different story. So for R1 universities, they would do maybe 1 to 2 courses in the spring and then in the fall semesters. And that's it, right? So as you can see, the teaching load is a lot lower, and that's probably 25% of their time. But they have to do a lot more research. So that's a lot of publications, a lot more grant writing. So I would say that's perhaps 50 to 75% of their time. So it's kind of the opposite. Generally speaking, no 2 schools are the same. Okay, so that percentage or that proportion is going to be a little bit different. But generally, if it's a research-focused university, of course, the main dish is research, and you will spend a lot more time on that. Versus for me, right, teaching-focused university, a lot more focus on teaching. And I do supervise students in the summer. So we have an on-site clinic, and I supervise grad students in the summer. For R1 universities, the professors don't really do research. You may not even need to be licensed in SLP to teach there, because they care more about your research productivity. Okay. By R2 universities, you do have to, they would prefer that you have a license so that you can supervise grad students as well. Okay. So that's that. And then I see that there's another new question under workplace, right? How will your accent affect your job? Excuse me. Yes, that's the one. Thank you, Ray. And your job choice, such as settings. I heard that American English accent is preferred, especially with pediatric clients. Does anyone would like to chime in and take a stab on this question?
I can try to address it. So I work at a private practice with pediatric clients. I would say that the question is not as much whether our accent will affect the job choice, but more how much more education we have to do for the public to make people aware about what we actually do. I think I get a lot of clients sometimes with families and parents who have very, very little idea what speech and language therapy even is. You'd be surprised how many parents will come to me for like a speech and language referral and then only talk about articulation and don't think about the language part of it, or only think about the language and don't think that articulation has anything to do with their language, or vice versa. I think that for like whether the accent is important or not, I think has a lot to do with just where our field is just in terms of the public being educated. I will say that I know that I have a pretty neutral, like kind of American English accent, I would say, but I don't look American English, and that's very clear to a lot of my families. I have never had a problem with it. I'm only a clinical fellow, so I guess I don't have that much experience in the field, but I've never really had a family either complain or say anything about me not being American English. But maybe others who have been in the field for longer can attest to some level of bias that parents might have, especially with, again, the pediatric clients, because a lot of parents are very protective over their children. It's just kind of second nature that they would want, you know, someone who speaks the same accent as them. That's what I would say.
Okay, wonderful. Under admissions, there's a new question about CCAS, right? So that's the kind of the central application portal, right? Any comments or advice about CCAS application? I know the time for transcript verification can be long. I'm not sure if I know that portal well enough to comment on this. I do write letters of recommendation for my students, and I would just upload it into CCAS, but I don't know anything else about transcript verification. Jean, do you know anything about this?
Not really.
Okay, so I guess you'll have to ask.
I know that for my program, when we start to review applications, the person who is in charge of the putting the files together will let us know this person's transcript is being processed. We won't say no. We will still review the person's transcript just to make sure that, assuming that the transcript will be arrived for us to make a decision when we have to make a decision. So I don't see that as a problem. So if you worry about it, I would suggest that you apply early to make sure that you don't run into issues like this.
Right, and I think January 15th is the kind of the standard deadline, right? There are definitely exceptions, right? Some schools will ask you, to submit everything earlier, perhaps towards the end of September, December, not September. But some schools will say, hey, February 15th is our deadline, but I would still say like maybe 80 to 90% of schools, right? January 15th is the deadline. So definitely start early. That could be a strategy. Otherwise, you will have to forward this question. Whoever asked this, you will have to forward your question to your undergraduate director, right? Or if your school has a grad program, right, ask the grad director. They'll probably have a better answer to that. All right. New question under diversity. Have you ever faced microaggression in the field before? Not very specific to our discussion here, but I know that don't we have an anti-racism learning community that meets monthly, right? So I think there's lots of good discussions going on if you participate in that learning community.
Yeah, and let me know if you are interested in being part of this group. And if you are a caucus member, you should get an email from us. We have a newsletter coming out sometimes once a week, sometimes every other week, to let you know what programs that we have. And like what Timothy said, that the anti-racism learning community will be meeting every month. Maybe not in November, since we have our annual membership meeting, and we'll be meeting again in December. So that will be a good place to talk about microaggression and those type of things. Just let me know.
Yes, stay connected. Alrighty, so audience, do you have any additional questions? Feel free to unmute yourself, or you can type in your question in chat. We'll try to address them ASAP.
I know there's one question we haven't answered about the diversity and inclusion, but how can applicants know if a workplace or a grad program is committed to supporting communities of color? And my suggestion is just ask them, like, what are you doing to support like DEI? And you'll know from their reaction. Like not even what they say, just how they react to you asking the question, whether they've thought about it, whether they have something in place that they're trying to implement to make it happen. You'll be able to tell easily.
Yes, and that's actually a great question to bring up in your interview, right? Should there be one? Hey, that's a question to ask. Absolutely.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think to take it a step further, it's nice to pull out if that program you're applying to is accredited by ASHA or AAA, whatever the accrediting program they're going from, kind of listing out, it says that we're meant to cover these things in terms of like cultural competency. Can you tell me how that's covered in the classes? Like, what do we teach on? Who teaches that? And I think huge insight, if you're going to open houses for programs or pull aside and say, are there grad students present today that I can talk to and ask them and say, like, do you feel that your program is committed to supporting our community? Do you feel supported? Do you feel like there are microaggressions commonly happening on campus? Do you feel comfortable with your professors and the relationships you're having? What's the culture like? Unfortunately, that's hard at my program specifically. There's a lot of different perspectives and a lot of change happened, especially the past 2 years. So many good conversations being had, but also a lot of recognition for what's not being done that needs to be, where the gaps are. And those gaps, and I think especially the fact that this question was asked because it's a very real concern, and something that you deserve to look into and to have a grasp on before understanding where you're potentially committing yourself for the next 2 to 4 years. So I can't emphasize enough how nice it is to have the insight of a current student, especially a student of color that you connect with and you feel like will be transparent. And take that advice also with a grain of salt. One person's perspective isn't everyone's. So if you can get a good pool, I think that's ideal.
Awesome. I think that's everything, unless I missed another question. So thank you very much, Elise, for catching that.
I think another one was just put on the Padlet.
Oh, there's a new one?
And I think it was asked twice under workplace also.
Oh.
So going into academia, how could SLP participate in more teaching opportunities that will turn into an adjunct position or an associate professor position in a university? That I do not know. Sheen, would you like to take a stab on this? Again, not specific to our panel discussion here, but Sheen, if you like to briefly talk about this, or maybe whoever's asking this to connect to Sheen, she'll probably have some tips for you.
I'm trying to read that question again.
So it's under workplace, going into academia. How can SLPs participate in more teaching opportunities?
It's a wonderful way to go from the clinical position into an academic position, especially like if you look around in the universities around you, if you feel like that you would like to have a teaching position there, it's always great to reach out to their department chair. Have your resume ready, write it in the way that shows that you can you can teach, you have had some teaching experiences and clinical experiences, especially supervising experiences, because that's what university programs would like. They like people to be able to teach specific courses. They like to have faculty who will be able to supervise students, and your it kind of, so it sometimes people will be on maternity leave, or there's a like a position that they know is gonna be opening up soon. It's every program has their own timeline for each position line, so it's kind of, if you don't reach out to the program to find out how is it possible for you to be part of their team, you will never know. You just have to be actually reach out and ask them. So that's like a couple of my students, former students, they are actually applying for faculty positions now. They have been a clinician for a few years, and now they're like, I think I could teach and I could supervise, and I would like to try that. So they reached out, and it's been fascinating. So I think definitely try it. And when you are writing up your resume for the position, make sure you demonstrate that you can do what they really need you to do.
Yeah, great tips. And how about practicing SLPs or recent grad wishing they knew before their first placement? Any tips?
I think what I realized in grad school is that I really had very elaborate lesson plans, and that kind of just like overworked me. Once I got into the groove of things, it's okay to just quickly grab a book. You know, it's okay to just pull a game and pull up Arctic Station. Like, don't put too much emphasis into creating the best lesson plan, because you're just gonna burn out. I will say, like, Tips and Tricks Teachers Pay Teachers is a great resource, and Boom Cards is a great resource. I always go to those two when it comes to fun activities for my students without having to. They have a lot of free resources. I hardly ever pay, but you know, they're very interactive as well. So definitely rely on those, especially during the pandemic. A lot of SLPs started creating these online activities. And so there's a lot of resources out there where you don't have to start from scratch. So yeah, it's always fun and nice to create elaborate lesson plans. But if you're feeling like you're getting burnt out from it, just know there are a lot of online resources to use.
Absolutely. And know that you're allowed to make lots of mistakes, right? It's part of the training process. So don't feel like, I think Emily commented on this, don't feel like you need to know everything, okay? Ask around and consult with your professors, learn from your peers, and you will do fantastic. I think we're going to end our panel discussion here, but before we go, could we take a group picture?